dolls. She appears to be a girl playing with dolls, being nurturing and tending to the children or the dolls and kissing them. Speaking of kissing, here we have some young children. I think they look like toddlers. You might see that. Maybe they're emulating what they see in adults, or maybe they're just fond of one another. Some young children kissing here too. Teachers may not be as comfortable with this because of older children, but children have a sexual identity, right? Drawing from some of the literature, in recognizing that children do have a sexual identity, many schools, many educators in schools still have and maintain heterosexual and heteronormative, heteronormative stances about what should be in classrooms and how children should interact with one another. So the assumptions that boys and girls should be the ones kissing and holding hands, not girls and girls, or that people are otherwise situated. And many times these heterosexual assumptions are put forward and celebrated in the childhood classrooms. The notion of conforming to traditional and clearly defined gender roles, how people should present themselves as far as their clothes, their attire, their mannerisms. Much of that is reinforced and also encouraged in contexts where young children go to school, and also in the curriculum, the content and the subject matter that children are learning. School systems often perpetuate this heteronormative hierarchy, and Robinson suggests with early childhood education, so that would be, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, very much part of this normalization process. So what's normative and what's fitting and what's appropriate in an early childhood classroom, many researchers are finding, is that boys are with girls if they're going to have affectionate and emotional relationships, and girls are not with girls or boys with boys. This image I like. What do you see here? And how might you read this image? Yes.
Well, it's a little girl in the kitchen.
Yes.
And she's doing cooking, I guess,
Okay.
which women are expected to be doing.
Okay. Want to answer that?
Basically, I was going to say this.
Okay. And not only is she in the kitchen, she's barefoot in the kitchen, right? And sometimes you hear the best place for the woman is in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, right? You just attend to those things and nothing beyond that. And if that's the norm, if that's the case that some people continue to hold, here we have a young child just, beginning to fulfill that notion. And looks like it might be a preschool classroom, not sure if it's her home, but I just thought that was really fitting in showing how school settings, particular school settings, fulfill that, that heteronormative perspective. So we have this idea that young children don't have a sexual identity, that elementary and early childhood settings, or places where young children go to school, often perpetuate these norms. And I say then there's a sense of urgency that we begin to shape and disrupt those normative perspectives. Thinking now about that second objective. Why is it urgent? Why is it important? Well, one reason it's important is because young children may recognize their sexual identity and see it as something that's normative or alternative. Young children also may see sexual diversity in their homes with their family members, with their caregivers. Anyone familiar with the baby boom? Sorry? Baby boom. So around the 1970s, at least this is the way that I understand it, when people who identified as gay and lesbian began to come out and have a greater visibility, folks started to form families, and they would intentionally become parents, sometimes through a host of means. But this whole notion of intentional family planning in same-sex coupled families resulted in what a lot of people refer to as this baby boom. So moving forward to 2014, or certainly the century that we're in, the decade that we're in now, and this wave of marriage equality in the United States, families are again forming, and it's highly likely and probable that in public schools you will have children from households with two moms or two dads entering classrooms. So then it's important for teachers to, one, be mindful of that diversity, and also, two, be responsive to it. Second, Leslie Newman, who is the author of many of the LGBT children's texts, said anecdotally she knows of many children, and that many of the children that she knows live in two-mom households. Another reason for teachers to be mindful of the diversity. Gary Gates does a lot of work with the Williams Institute out of California, and focusing specifically on demographic information around LGBT families and children from two same-sex parent households. Two pieces of information I'd like to share with you from his recent work is that approximately 40% of children who are in same-sex coupled households are of color, and then roughly 3 in 1,000 of U.S. school children in the United States live with a same-sex couple. New information? Did you know this? So, in addition to the demographic of families, there are also new trends relative to transgender young people, children. And I like to share the story about Thomasina and Lily. Theirs represents the information that's listed. A number of children born male or natal males are increasingly coming out as transgender, or proclaiming being born in the wrong body. Some folks will describe themselves as being trapped in the wrong body, physically being born one sex, but identifying with a different gender. Some people refer to that as gender dysphoria in some of the medical literature, science literature. It has also been documented that children as young as 7 and children in grades 3 through 6 have acknowledged the disconnect between their gender and their biological sex. So, there's anecdotal information, but there's also factual information to support that. Hopefully this will work. I'd like to share this clip again because it allows you to hear the voices of 2 children, and they are going to talk about being friends.
Lily and Thomasina are hanging out late on a Saturday night. They've asked their parents if they can have a sleepover. This is only the second day they've known each other, but that doesn't matter.
I said hi, and she said hi, and we became like best friends. And here we are right now.
They live on opposite sides of the country, but other than that, they've got lots in common. For starters, they're both 8 years old.
She's nice and I'm nice. I wish I had straight teeth. Like I have 2 big teeth. I have crooked teeth on the bottom, so we have crooked teeth.
And they go on.
We're both awesome. We both like ice cream. Do you like Chinese food? Yeah. I like Chinese food. That's another thing. I didn't think of anything else.
Only when asked do they mention their other extraordinary bond.
I don't feel anything like a boy. I'm a girl. And that's all I have to say. I'm a girl.
Thomasina and Lily are both transgender, born with the anatomy of boys, but who now live as girls.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people like us, but we just don't know it yet.
Lily looks completely like a girl. Chin-length blonde hair and pierced ears. She loves wearing her pink sneakers with her all-pink summer dresses. Thomasina has long, wavy brown hair and delicate facial features. She wears kickskirts and headbands and 2-piece bathing suits. Usually it's hard for Thomasina to talk about how she feels on the inside, but this weekend with Lily, it's different. before drifting off for the night, lying on the floral quilt of a big bed with Lily on her tummy and Thomasina propped up with pillows. These two get to share what's usually kept secret in their 8-year-old lives. Before this weekend, neither one had ever met anyone who's transgender.
When I first meet someone, I don't tell them anything.
Once you get to know them, would you tell them a little bit more?
Actually, now I've been doing something where they later sometimes figure out. And I actually have this one friend who doesn't know a thing about it. And I actually kind of like that, but she doesn't know a thing about it. She just thinks I'm a normal person.
Yeah, I like it when people think I'm normal.
Yes.
I just find it interesting how like the mother said okay like right away, but like I kind of had a feeling that was gonna happen. The father was gonna be a little bit hesitant, but in the end, I'm glad. I know in some cases it's not always as easy as they showed in the video, so I'm glad in a way that both parents were able to come to a decision and say that it's better that I say that my child, if he wants to be called a she, then that should be okay. And I find that really interesting because I never really saw a video about it. It's not really as profound as it should be. It should be out there way more. It's not. So I'm glad you showed it.
So I'm not a parent, but I've often heard parents say, and specifically mom, I know my child, right? So maybe mom could send something in a child and was just waiting for the child to kind of come out and express. So, yes.
For some reason, like it really hurt when I heard her say that I like when people think I'm normal.
Yeah.
That makes me really sad.
Yeah. So that's cool. Let's be sad now, right? So that when we're in the classroom, we're ready to empower children, and we're not sitting there crying and just making that an emotional thing. And that's part of the reason why I do the work. If nothing else, just to have the conversation, and maybe you will delve and explore more, so that when you are in the classroom, you're not just crying, you're empowering and giving students voice and visibility. Awesome. Let's see what this means. So thinking about this sense of urgency, we have children who are sexual, children who have sexual identity. They recognize it as fitting in within boxes, and sometimes they recognize their identity as being outside of the box. There's also this notion of these identities and characteristics among teachers and educators. So there's teacher uncertainty, right? You have teacher educators, or maybe you've read, you need to be responsive to sexual diversity in the classroom. You need to recognize that there are 7-year-olds who are transgender. You need to, okay? And that's what we say, and then we wish you off and you go until, the sunset or whatever. But what is associated with this uncertainty then is you have the information, but you don't know what to do with it. So that's part of the reason why there's a sense of urgency. We need to help you, and I'm still trying to figure it out too. We need to help you and talk about ways in which you might be responsive. Then there's also teacher reluctance. Maybe you know that there is a need to be responsive, but you are reluctant because the standards say you need to do X, Y, and Z, and you're not seeing how you can fit it into the stated mandatory curriculum, right? You go outside of that, you lose your job. You're required to teach the standards. So there's some reluctance. Teachers don't understand the scope and sequence of how they fit the topic, how they fit the genre and the text into the curriculum. And then finally, there's just apprehension. Some people are just, resistant to the idea for whatever reason. Maybe it conflicts with their ethos or conflicts with their notion. Even though the lives are in front of them, they just don't see it as real. They're apprehensive. In this particular quote, the language says that there are teachers who are freaking out, just not knowing how to respond and be mindful to children, being mindful to the situation, or not knowing what to do. So they're just, they're not crying in the sense. They're anxious and they don't know what to do. Yeah.
I guess with some of them, it could be their religious background.
Absolutely.
It would be hard for them to teach them if they believe something totally different.
Absolutely.
And they'd be put in a situation where they would have to teach it.
Sure. So from things outside of maybe a child that they just met or a new job they've only been in for a year, but family values, religious stances, however it is that people think and function and believe, those things really being ingrained in a human being, and them thinking, I can't go beyond that. I can't diverge from that. Well, here is an instance where freaking out took place. Anyone familiar with Coy Mathis' story? Coy's story, I think, came to resolution in 2013. Coy started for kindergarten in a public school in Denver. And in kindergarten, anyone familiar with kindergarten classrooms and how they're set up? How they set up? Isn't it groups? Groups, might have groups and stations, yeah?
In the carpet.
Yeah, the carpet room, right?
Yeah.
Little workspaces. How about the bathrooms in the kindergarten classroom?
The bathrooms are in the class.
The bathrooms are in the classroom. They're a self-contained bathroom. Do you know if the bathrooms are for boys and girls, or are they just toilets and bathrooms?
It's usually one.
Yeah, so you kind of use whichever bathroom or toilet you like to use, right? That's kindergarten. Then you progress, you graduate and go to the first grade. Then what happens when you're in the first through fifth grade? Separate bathrooms, right? So for Coy had been using any bathroom he wanted to. Maybe there was a girl in the bathroom before he went in, then Coy went in. Just, a whole different dynamic. Moved to the first grade outside of that self-contained classroom, and the adults have something else to say about that.
The capital for more. Shaw, this did attract a lot of national base, puts Colorado in the national spotlight. The state civil rights division says a 6-year-old student who was born a boy can use the girls' bathroom. Let's go live now to Shaw Turner at the state capitol for more. Shaw, this did attract a lot of national attention, and we'll learn more later on today. Is that right?
Absolutely. In just a few hours at noon, there will be a press conference on this landmark ruling. And we first introduced you to Coy Mathis back in February. And Coy was born a boy, but is a girl and wanting to use the girls' facilities at the school. Parents say that's only the fair thing to do. A controversial ruling based on a school located near Colorado Springs. In January, Eagleside Elementary School in Fountain told Coy Mathis she had to use the boys' bathroom. Her parents eventually pulled her out of the school and filed a discrimination lawsuit.
She's being set up right now for harassment and bullying because they've stigmatized her by making her be the only child that has to use restrooms different from everybody else.
During a rally at the state capitol, Coy's lawyer set the stage for a tough fight.
It is going to be a test of Colorado's Anti-Discrimination Act with respect to transgender people and their ability to use bathrooms that match who they are.
Coy says it just comes down to this. The school has support from some online, one person arguing this is parents abusing and brainwashing their children to make a statement. Others disagree.
She should be able to use the girls' bathroom even because that's how she is.
You can't tell a 6-year-old child they can't use a toilet because you are uncomfortable with your children peeing in the bathroom with them. I think it's ridiculous.
Coy loved girls' things from the beginning.
Anything pink and sparkly.
Many say the state's ruling means Coy now has the right to truly be who she is.
She deserves to go to school and have the same opportunities that all of the other children have.
Now, the school issued a statement saying that they acted appropriately. Meanwhile, Coy has been homeschooled since all of this got started. And again, just a few hours, we're going to hear from the attorneys in this case at noon, and we will have the very latest for you at kwgn.com. Reporting live from this.
So as a result of that case and other states that have, or school districts that have been faced with the situation, many school districts are leaning toward avoiding lawsuits and have written policies, because they didn't have them before, where in most cases where however a child identifies is how a child will be accommodated. So if I don't know, if a child is born male, goes to school on Tuesday and says that on Tuesday they're female, the school needs to work with that child as though they are female. Next year, a child identifies as male, teacher needs to respond to that. You don't need documentation, you don't need the parents know. Schools and teachers just need to be responsive of that, and that has been policy in many states now relative to being mindful and just respecting children's identity. Again, thinking about the sexuality of young people. So, I've given you some situations of human beings, young children, and their lives and how they are living or trying to live. Again, as a public school educator, you are expected by law to teach the stated curriculum, the mandatory curriculum. And if you're teaching anything outside of that, you could be fired, right? Even if you think it's something that's beneficial and useful. So I always say to teachers, if you're going to work in public schools, teach to the standards. Well, I'm able to help you make some connections to the standards. thinking about contemplating how the literature might fit into the standards. So if you are interested in working on the preschool level, the state of New Jersey has standards for preschool teachers. And I've highlighted some of the texts that come from the standards. I didn't write the standards. Legislators wrote the standards. They've been approved. They are law. So if you're teaching 3-year-olds, the law says this is what you're supposed to teach. And I've highlighted in red. So making reference to age-appropriate text, high-quality literature. Actually, this should read reading literature. Standards 6.1, unique characteristics. Text should help children to understand the unique characteristics that are in characters in books and others. This allows them to see themselves and to learn about their peers. Teachers should incorporate books that speak to and highlight gender and non-stereotypic roles. So, moving beyond that little girl just playing in the kitchen, right? And then texts that also develop an awareness for the cultures that are within a particular classroom and outside of it. And many times when I talk to people about cultural diversity, they'll say, well, we don't have any black kids in the class, so we don't need to read about black people. Well, there are black people in the world, so yes, you do need to read about, and have those kind of texts in the classroom. Same thing here, right? That's helping children become mindful of the diversity in the world. Many times some of those children might also see themselves and they become empowered and they start to feel good about themselves. And when you feel good and you're going to school, you can learn, you're comfortable, it's all good. So that's preschool. If you're going to work on the K through 6 level, the elementary level, there are more standards. And these come from the Comprehensive Health and Physical Education. The state of New Jersey has 9 subject areas that you, as a public school educator, are required to teach. All 9. And there's a whole lot of standards in there. And if you look closely enough, you can find a connection. So I was able to find a connection. Children in the 2nd grade, so 242, 2nd grade, our children are supposed to learn about relationships and families. And many times when I talk to teachers about LGBT literature, they'll say, oh yes, we're studying families, and they'll bring it in that way. Well, hopefully they'll start there and they will continue, not just having these separate discussions and lessons around family. And then in the 2nd grade, that's the 4th grade. And then in the 2nd grade, character development. Children need to understand characters who are in text and how maybe some of those characters might roll out in the real world to human beings and how folks exist. So standards, K through 5, K through 6. And more standards, okay? The Common Core, that's rolling out now. I think we're in 45 states and the District of Columbia. States have adopted the Common Core. New Jersey uses the Common Core for math and language arts. The Common Core, the state has adopted these standards. You are required to teach in the standards. Children need to have access to a range of texts. You can't just keep teaching the same text, the same narratives, the same genre, all right? Expand it. Literature and informational text. And I will tell you as we move through the books, a lot of the authors and the narratives are pretty much true narratives. They are representative of lives and perspectives, either of the authors or through the lens of the author and a child or family member or someone that they know. So standards say that you need to incorporate this genre of text into the standards. If that's not enough support, they're professional organizations. As teachers, you will join and become affiliated with particular groups, and many times they inform and work with state regulators around standards and things that teachers are required to adhere. Relative to K through 6 education, there is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They have in their guidelines the expectation that young children will have access to LGBT literature, specifically thinking about diverse lives and cultural diversity. The International Reading Association, another professional organization which focuses on literature, language arts development, and literacy for the younger grades, have 2 standards. And the notion being that children have access to a wide range of texts. You can't just keep reading the same books. give children access to a wide range of texts and narratives. It helps them to understand the world, it helps them to understand their peers, and it helps them to understand themselves. So that piece is there. This is a multicultural, most of you are in the multicultural children's literature course, is that right? Yes? So give us a definition of children's literature or multicultural children's literature. Literature is cut off. What's the definition? Don't have me tell Dr. Paul you already have definition. What's the definition? Yeah. How would you define it? Children's literature, multicultural children's literature. Oh my gosh, help me out here. Books for whom? Books for children, right? What else? Sorry?
Dealing with diversity.
That books that deal with diversity, really big thing, right? Anything else about children's literature? Yes.
Family traditions, customs, values,
Okay.
family structures.
Yeah. Anything else? Children's literature, children's books, multicultural literature. Well, the cool thing is I don't know your name, so I won't be able to say you didn't speak, right? You need to know the definitions of these things. All right. So I'm not going to share that one right now. Let's get into some of the books. So on your cards, did you write any titles? Yes? What did you write?
I think it's Entangle Makes Three.
And Tango Makes Three. Tango is a popular one. Anyone else write Tango? No? So you're the winner then. Any other titles? Any other titles? Okay, you're going to have a lot after this then. All right, so when I started looking at the books, I just attempted to classify them. I had no idea that I would put my hands on more than 200 books. I have found that the first book, relative to lesbian and gay narratives, and for the most part, these speak to the adults in the books, not the children. When Megan Went Away by Jane Severance. This was written in 1978, and a lot of folks in the lesbian community were just put off, right? So you think people would be happy to